Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm so excited to be joined today by Adam Gendelman, who's the VP of Sales at Wunderkind. We're going to have a conversation that's going to dive into one of the most interesting and still emerging opportunities in connected TV, pause ads. For those of you who may not be familiar, these pause ads are exactly what they sound like, ads that appear when a viewer pauses their content. They're still relatively new in the CTV landscape, and they've already shown some impressive results. Adam, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So, we know that pause ads are still kind of a newer concept in connected television. Just to get started, how do you usually explain them to marketers who haven't maybe encountered them before?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as we explain this to marketers, we really want to hone in on the user experience. So, when someone hits their pause button or looks to take a break with their content, that's when a user is served this pause ad experience. So, it's triggered only when a user pauses their CTV viewing experience, and that ad will remain present until they resume watching their programming. And why we kind of leaned into this experience, it's really because of the data that shows that users are actually pausing their content on a regular basis. The research that is out there and the research we've done is that 80% of users regularly are pausing their content. To distill that down even further, on a user basis, users are pausing on average 4 to 5 times pauses per day. All that leads to is the length of the pause, where we see that 66% of pause events exceed 60 seconds in length. So it's really an opportunity to monetize that experience or that inflection point when we know a user is taking a break from their content. They may go up to get something to eat or place an order on Seamless or Grubhub, or go check their text messages. But that experience and that ad will be on that page for a visibly longer part of time versus an in-stream or mid-roll or pre-roll ad.
Fantastic and very interesting. You mentioned some impressive stats about, how often people pause and some of the other elements. And I know that some recent research showed that 41%, there was a 41% lift in ad memorability when the pause ads compared to kind of some of those pre-roll or mid-roll. Why do you think the pause ad experience is kind of, demonstrating some of these, impressive stats just kind of out of as of initial research?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to like that user experience and how long that ad is actually triggered or rendered on a page. Again, a user has to take that engagement to pause that content for that ad to show, and that will visibly be on the page until they resume that content, right? So what that means for advertisers and the data that drives for advertisers and marketers is what you said, that 41% lift in ad memorability. Just because that ad is more memorable just based off the time that it's shown on screen, that length of time that's shown on screen. Going back to that stat I touted earlier, 66% of all pauses are over 60 seconds in length. So meaning that that ad is more impactful than an in-stream or pre-roll ad, which you might forget, or you might, run to the bathroom, or you might go check your phone during that kind of pod break in a traditional sense. Other metrics to tout is, yeah, we've run a couple studies with our friends at Adelaide, really honing in on attention metric, AU score, and what we see is that we average a very high AU score compared to other traditional formats like a pre-roll or mid-roll ad. Our average AU score is 64. Traditionally, that's about 2 to 3x above what um, traditionally for like an in-stream ad specifically. So again, all to go back to, it's all about the user experience, about when and how we're placing that ad in a more memorable approach than just a traditional in-stream ad.
And some impressive stats on user engagement, which makes sense with the length of time and an engagement with that particular ad pod. One of the questions we've been having a lot of conversations with our clients around pause ads, and obviously this being somewhat of a newer concept. And one of the first questions that always comes up to play is, around measurement. Great, so this new kind of ad element is available to me from pause ads, but I measure it in comparison to some of the other tactics that I might be running. So what can advertisers expect to see from a measurement and back end perspective if they were to kind of incorporate a pause ad into their marketing mix?
Yeah. So from a pause ad perspective, just being it is a little bit new and nascent to the space versus like a traditional like in-stream ad, measurement is a little bit opaque at this point. What we try to strive or what we strive and market and tout and market is we'll throw on any like third-party validation measurement study with the likes of Adelaide, as I just mentioned, to measure attention metrics, how attentive is the ad to the user. We also like to tout like those attitudinal metrics from the Lucid or Cints of the world, the Miller Browns. How favorable is that ad to the user, how memorable it is, the brand recall, the purchase intent, etc. We also like to tout and throw in any Foursquare or foot traffic study to measure the impact of someone being served a pause ad and how does that relate to getting them to that store or that retail or brick and mortar location. Um, yeah, those, and then the holy grail is to measure like anything from like a ROAS perspective for like the Circanas of the world, the Nielsen Catalina solutions, et cetera. So all that is what we like to package up to marketers and advertisers, and really thinking outside the lens of, hey, yes, still measure the reach, the frequency, the impression volume, but also let's take that a step further and measure things that actually drive performance or outcomes, the attention quality, the attitudinal favorability metrics, the Foursquare metrics, and the holy grail being the ROAS as well.
Yeah, those are, it sounds like it's really expanding what you can measure on the back end from a KPI perspective, including brand lift and all those additional engagement metrics. When you think about, an advertiser, and this is often kind of a normal question we get as well, is, I've got $100,000 in advertising spend. Typically, I would, purchase a number of impressions between pre and mid roll. How should I allocate my budget related to pause ads if I want to carve out portion of that budget to test pause ads in comparison to some of the other impressions that I'm purchasing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the best approach is to, yeah, obviously start with a test and learn budget. Doesn't necessarily you have to carve out like 100K to devote specifically to pause ads. And we can start with 5K, 10K, 15K, 20K in order to prove out the viability and performance of what this pause ad experience is driving for marketers and advertisers. And how we like to do it is what we talked about earlier, pairing that with a third-party measurement study or platform to drive some sort of outcome metric or something outside of just impressions that we're measuring the effectiveness of the pause ad experience. So yeah, we like to tout and we like to really say that start with a test budget, whatever that may be, and whatever that fits within the means of the advertiser or your budget allocation, and we let the performance do the talking on the back end compared to a pre-roll or mid-roll experience.
That's great. One of the, in the past, there have been some pain points around pause ads. Number one, typically a high barrier to entry of purchasing pause ads, maybe through one publisher, and having to hit some pretty high minimums on that. The other component that we've heard about specifically has been around fragmentation, because there's only specific, apps publishers that will kind of engage currently in the pause ad space. How does the Wunderkind supply simplify that activation for buyers?
Yeah, great question as well. So that really is the challenge in the marketplace right now because there's no standardization of the pause ad spec as it relates to the IAB. Every app in OEM is doing it differently, meaning if you want to buy pause ads specifically with a Roku or an LG or a Sling or a DirecTV or ESPN, all those specs are going to be different because, again, that goes back to the standardization of it. So, what our technology is doing is we're actually transcoding the actual creative asset to match the look and feel or that spec of each app or OEM. So, the idea is that our inventory is available across each major app or OEM, the ones I mentioned of the world, where we're able to run one creative asset on each of those with one deal ID. Instead of, the traditional way is that you would have to traffic that spec to each app or OEM on a direct basis, which leads to, longer time in the platform for a buyer, longer time trafficking things. Our technology will recode that or transcode that in real time. So we're saying that, hey, you can run across again each major app and OEM with one creative variation to match each spec in OEM, and also one deal ID. So just kind of uniforming the whole approach in general.
I know you all currently have some participating, OEMs apps that are a part of the offering. Any insight, or can you give us a glimpse into whether there'll be additional ones added soon?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's the name of the game that we're really pushing on. The demand is there from app or from the advertiser world. Like people and advertisers, not people, but advertisers and brands want to purchase this unique format in a way that is conducive to their work streams, going back to the challenge we're solving with the one creative asset, the one deal ID. What we need more of, and what as this continues to build and scale and we continue to evangelize this market, is the supply of that. So yeah, really focus on I call them the walled gardens of the world, the Peacocks, the Rokus, of the world, where yeah, they've been a little bit more cagey about getting integrated with us just because they feel, and rightfully so, they can do it on their own. Why bring in a third party partner like ourselves? But what we're finding in market, it's really hard to do and to pull off. Our technology solves for that in the interim, especially with the no with the lack of standardization right now. So yeah, really, focus on the Disneys, the Peacocks, the Paramounts of the world is where our focus on from a supply perspective.
Yeah, we're excited to see this continue to expand into other providers. Let's switch a little bit to talking about the advertisers. What are the best, or are there emerging any unique use cases, whether it be industries or verticals that you are seeing kind of taking advantage of pause ads that you could share with us?
Yeah, I would say our approach, we are advertiser or vertical agnostic. I think just because of the performance we drive and those like metrics and like foot traffic studies or attitudinal metric lends itself to the fact that any advertiser can activate with us. What I failed to mention in the forefront, one thing we do lean on as well is QR scan codes. So we can overlay the actual creative in the pause ad environment to include like a QR code. So for example, if a Sephora ad is showing, we can have a QR code like driving back to that point of purchase or that path of purchase, right? Where a user can then, go back to that site, purchase that product right away within that pause ad experience right on their phone. So not having to get out an external device or even a laptop or a desktop, right? What we see, and going back to retail, we've seen retail really lean into this environment, specifically Zales of the world, which we've done an open PR case study of or for, and also Ulta. Both of those campaigns drove great foot traffic study back to the sites, or back to the stores, and for Ulta, for Zales specifically, actually drove attributable sales directly from that pause ad experience, meaning someone was actually purchasing something on the Zales site as it relates to someone being shown that pause ad experience. So all to say is that, yeah, really the advertisers or verticals are leaning into this, very heavy retail, but we're also seeing consumer electronic goods, auto, insurance companies, CPG companies. It really runs the gamut. But the first ones to actually lean into this experience, and I think just from a QR code perspective, and also being the point where we could drive back to an actual, foot traffic study, is really retail clients as well.
Yeah, super helpful. You brought up a really great point that I kind of want to segue at the use cases. You talked about creative production and the QR codes and assisting some brands and being able to build out. We have gotten some questions, and I think it's a common thing. Okay, pause ad sounds interesting, but I don't have pause ad creative. Can you walk us through kind of that process and what you have built out to help advertisers uh,
Yeah,
in that regard?
yeah, definitely. So we offer of a creative solution as part of like added value to anybody, meaning like our creative services team will produce these creatives on behalf of the advertiser. All we need is just layered PSD files, files, etc. As it relates to creative and like what you can do within the real estate creatively, we started off doing just like static animated ads because that is what these apps and OEMs expected. They didn't want to take away from the user experience. We're serving like a pre-roll ad or an ad that would play on sound. What we have transitioned to is doing kind of a video of brand skin. So taking a video asset, so the same asset that would be available in an in-stream environment, placing that in a pause ad environment within that real estate, having that video loop with like a creative call to action on the side of a video with brand skin, outfitting that unit where the user can then go back or have a QR code click back to that site. What we also seen from a creative perspective is advertisers leaning into product carousels as well. So having kind of a product carousel where the ad and would feature multiple creative iterations right within that creative real estate. So instead of running 4 to 5 different creative variations in different points of like the creative journey, we can then simplify it to run all those products within that first frame or that one creative frame.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned QR codes, which is, oftentimes, a very big question around effectiveness and how do they work? Are you seeing any stats that you could share with us around the effectiveness of QR codes with the pause ads, specifically because of the time on screen?
Yeah, absolutely. So from Zales specifically, this is an open case study, so I can tout this. What we drove for them is a 2x higher QR code scan rate compared to the average marketplace benchmark. So we're seeing like great success and users really leaning into this experience. And then what that means is they're taking it a step further and actually engaging with that ad, pulling out their phone, using that QR code to eventually making a purchase. And as it related to Zales, we actually could tie back attributable purchases directly from that pause ad experience.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So what do you look at into the future pause ads? Where do you see this eventually going from a, predictions perspective?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I think it's less about like pause ads specifically. I think pause ads will continue to innovate, especially on the creative front, meaning what you can do in that real estate from a creative perspective. I think we've seen very huge strides in terms of the adaptability of being able to place a video within that unit, albeit it has to play without sound, right? Or like a carousel unit, as I previously mentioned. Where I see kind of the next step not only with pause ads, but as just a space in general and like interactive space in general, is us and advertisers really leaning into other interactive formats. And a couple formats that have been really highly touted or been across the trades and press are like home screen units or tile units on those apps and OEMs. So when you log into like a Samsung or your Vizio device, your LG device, like having that ad directly on like the home screen. Now, the idea is that to be able to, because of the lack of the standardization, being able to package that up in the same way we do from a pause ad experience. So every app or OEM has a different creative spec, specifically for like home screen ads as well. So having the same technology run on the back end where we can say like, hey, advertiser, like you want this home screen ad unit, the same way you want the pause ad unit, we'll be able to package that up the same way with one creative asset, one deal ID from a programmatic standpoint. Ultimately, where I want to get to and where I want to or where the technology should go is again having kind of like this AI machine learning model where we have more of these ad units in market, like these screensaver units to squeeze back units, these L bracket units to name a few of the ones that IB are touting in their hero initiative. Again, being able to package that up in the same way from a creative standpoint, but having this like AI or machine learning aspect where we'll be able to optimize in real time based on whatever outcome the advertiser wants to drive, where it be like foot traffic or attention quality or ad tune lift to that ad unit that's driving the most engagement or the most response to whatever that outcome may be or may be deemed by the advertiser or marketer.
We call them those glass takeovers for the OEM. Maybe that'd be exciting to see that be a little bit more, achievable for advertisers. A lot of times it is pretty isolated to the individual OEM, being able to take advantage of that real estate. So that's exciting to see that could be on the roadmap for the
Yeah,
future.
totally. 100%.
So what would you say is the biggest objection or maybe misconception is a better word that you receive in the marketplace around pause ads specifically?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception or like the biggest hurdle right now, um, is that a couple of advertisers, especially like legacy, like upfront buyers, are going to purchase all of their upfront or CTV investment as part of the upfront, right? So a lot of times when we approach buyers, they'll say like, "Hey, like where you can get this ad unit like within like our upfront buy, um, we can purchase it by other means, like et cetera." So what we do to try to combat that is saying, "Hey, like this commitment." With our apps and OEM partnerships that can count, these units can count against those specific commitments you might have on like an upfront basis. So that's probably the biggest like or not misconception, but probably the biggest hurdle we face in market is educating the teams and really productizing this and positioning this as a scatter buy as opposed to like an upfront buy. And the way we do that is the programmatic access we give to buyers. A lot of programmatic buyers want to innovate. They have to prove to their client they're innovating, and this is a great way to do that. That can be additional or additive to like whatever they're doing from an upfront perspective. I think also like going back to your question about like the biggest misconception about pause ads is that a lot of like press that we're seeing and a lot of things we're hearing in market is that it's easy to do, we can do it, other ad tech partners can do it. But the reality is everyone else outside of us and maybe a few other partners, actually no other partners, are just talking about pause ads. So like the idea of it, but no one can transact on it like programmatically through one creative spec, one deal ID, et cetera. And that's what the market challenge we mentioned in the forefront of the presentation is solving for. And that's where Wunderkind comes into play. We're solving for that problem that we were able to transact on this from like one deal ID available with any DSP, any SSP, et cetera, through one creative, as opposed to going out and trafficking that creative directly to the app and OEM, which creates a lot more work for the buyer advertiser. So all to say is that everyone's just still talking about it. No one's really executing it the way we are as it stands now. Now, that doesn't mean the competition is not catching up, but we're still the front runners, we're still the pole leaders in that regard, and we'll continue to innovate and expand on our offering. And of course, we want to make it transparent to buyers in a programmatic lens and have them layer on any targeting they want on their end via any DSP, SSP, and be able to transact on it programmatically.
Well, thanks there for that, Adam. Definitely a strategist, with the specialization in connected television. We are very excited about the development and look at this as a opportunity to democratize, pause ads for advertisers, and the integration from a programmatic perspective to be able to, continue to use the targeting and all the other benefits of programmatic is such a win. So we are, thankful for the partnership. Thanks for your time today, sharing with us about this product, and we look forward to future developments.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.